We all love a good ghost story. But what if those tales were actually true? Imagine staying in a place with a terrifying and chilling backstory lurking behind its walls. Hello you beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dolly and I discuss all things haunted, spooky, ghostly stories or even haunted, cursed or possessed items. So guys, I'm sorry for last week. I didn't actually post a video, but unfortunately I wasn't very well, so I haven't been able to make content, but I'm back and I'm ready to give you guys some ghostly stories. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the most haunted places in the UK that perhaps you shouldn't be visiting alone after dark. Don't forget guys, if you do like my content, don't forget to subscribe. It really does help my channel. And if you do enjoy real paranormal investigations, I do conduct them on Sundays at 9 PM where I'm joined with my partner Steve. So the first story that I have for you tonight takes us all the way back to Monday the 26th of April 1976. Now this was at the Emperor Theatre in Sutherland. Now, Sid James would perform for the last time at this theatre. Now, for you guys that don't know who Sid James is, he was a massive comedian icon and he actually starred in the Carry On films, which I absolutely love and I still watch to this day. Sid James was performing alongside the actress Olga Lowe in a comedy called The Mating Season. Now, while Sid James was on the sofa performing in the show, Olga Lowe comes out and she says a line to which Sid James does respond back to. She then says another line but gets no response from Sid James. Now, she just thinks Sid James is messing around because that's the kind of guy Sid James was. He was a comedian, so he did like to mess about. But when she looked over to Sid James, she had seen that he was actually slumped in his chair and quickly realised that something had gone terribly wrong. In a panic, she then shouts to the crew, "Lower the curtains." So the curtains had been lowered and the stage manager, called James, then runs onto the stage and he shouts out, "Ladies and gentlemen, is there a doctor in the house?" Now obviously the audience think he's just messing about, but he was in fact being very serious. So in fact there was actually a doctor in the house. Now the doctor did go on stage and try to revive Sid James, but unfortunately he couldn't. Sid James was then taken to a hospital in an ambulance, but unfortunately passed away in the back of that ambulance. He'd only been on stage for 15 minutes and the cause of death was a heart attack. Sid James was only 62 years when he passed away. So guys, now it's time for the actual ghost story of the Emperor Theatre. Now, while I was doing a bit of research, I actually found two ghosts that are said to haunt this theatre. Obviously one being Sid James. One of the ghost stories actually comes from another comedian called Les Dawson, and he actually wrote this in his book Liverpool 24. Les Dawson was in his dressing room preparing to go on stage when he could smell a very strong smell of whiskey. After he could smell the whiskey, he then heard a laugh. Then he looked up into a mirror and what he says he saw Sid James standing there staring back at him screaming. In Les Dawson's own words, he said this frightened the life out of him. And Les Dawson said he would never perform at that theatre again, which in fact he never did. But Sid James isn't the only ghost to apparently haunt the Emperor Theatre in Sutherland. In fact, there is another ghost called Molly Moselle, and she is often referred to as the Lady in White. Now, Molly was a stage manager and dancer back in 1949. Now, Molly was staying behind the theatre in some lodgings, and Molly told her landlady that she was going out just to post a letter. But unfortunately, Molly never came home that night. Molly was last seen on January the 14th, drinking with a Russian soldier in one of the pubs called Duncow. After Molly never arrived home, her landlady and all of her friends started to worry because this was out of character for Molly. So they contacted the police, who then opened an investigation. Now, unfortunately, Molly was never really found, and they just thought Molly had just disappeared into thin air. Now, 11 years on from this story, a torso and a leg was actually found in the River Wear. Now, a post-mortem was conducted on this torso and this leg, and they did kind of find out that they believed it was a woman between the ages of 25 to 30, standing at roughly 5'3" tall. Now, unfortunately, they never could say whether this was actually Molly or not, and unfortunately, Molly's disappearance is still a mystery to this day. Molly's ghost has been seen by a few people. Now, one member of staff was cleaning up into the theatre circle one evening when she heard a door slam. Now, she just thought maybe it was one of her colleagues coming in to give her a hand, but when she looked over, she saw a woman in white just standing there. The woman then turned around and walked off into the theatre top circle. Now, staff actually refuse to work in the theatre top circle, as they say it just gives them such bad and eerie vibes. But if you think that was terrifying, working alone of an evening, seeing a white lady just walk off, be prepared for this next story. In 2016, a young boy was visiting Sunderland for the very first time with his family, and they took him to see Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now, while the young boy was watching the performance, he needed to use the toilet. When the boy came back out of the toilet, he had said to his mother that he had spoke to a lady in the toilet who called herself Molly. Now, very alarmed by this, his mother went straight up to the staff and explained to them, but the staff had said, there is nobody called Molly that works at this theatre. So guys, let me know on your thoughts. Did you enjoy these ghost stories? Do you believe in these ghost stories? Or have you had experiences in theatres yourself? But just remember guys, the next time you go to the theatre, could Sid or Molly be performing just one last time? Up next is Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Opening in the summer of 1896, Blackpool Pleasure Beach is one of the UK's most famous amusement parks. With its thrilling rides, exciting attractions, this park attracts visitors from all over the world. But did you know this park also is home to a more darker and chilling history? The most famous ghost story dates back decades, and it in fact comes from the ghost train itself. Which is kind of ironic, being a ghost train and actually having a ghost somewhere inside that train. I mean, can you imagine riding the ride and the next thing you know, you've got someone sitting next to you who you think is part of the act, but really it's a ghost. I mean, that is actually quite scary when you think about it. So in 1930, a local man called Cloggy worked at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and he actually worked on the ghost ride. Now, local reports say that he absolutely loved his job and he loved working on the ghost train. But unfortunately, Cloggy was killed while working at the amusement park, and since then, many say they have seen the ghostly figure of Cloggy. Now, many reports say that employees and visitors have in fact encountered a dark, shadowy figure dressed in old-fashioned clothes lurking around the ghost train. Others say that once the park is closed and they are going to check the ride to make sure that nobody is on it or it needs maintenance or cleaning, they have heard the sound of clogs tapping along the corridor of the ghost train ride. Now, visitors actually say that when they get off the ride, they felt as though they were being watched by unseen eyes, and also said they felt cold spots in certain areas of the actual train ride. Rumours of Cloggy's ghost still haunt the park to this very day. My next ghost story comes all the way from Devon, and this is at the Old Church Inn pub. In Newton Abbot is a historic pub dating back to the 13th century, located in a classic Devon village. Now this pub has become infamous for the strange going-ons and its ghostly legends. The ghost stories of the Old Church Inn actually date back to the 13th century. Now eyewitnesses that visit this pub have said they have witnessed strange going-ons, ghostly footsteps, apparitions, and unexplained things that happen in the night. The frequent and most well-known ghost to be seen at this inn by many people is of a tall man. Some say this spirit is said to be trapped here and will be haunting the inn forever, watching over whoever may come and stay or even visit this inn. But there is a more terrifying story at this haunted pub. A family was staying in one of the rooms at the pub when one of their children woke up screaming, saying there was a man just staring at them at the foot of his bed. The unexplained apparition then just vanished. Other guests have reported hearing whispers outside their room, followed by ghostly footsteps, and when they go outside the corridors just to double check, there is nobody there. This is the most haunted pub in Devon, and as you can imagine, it does attract a lot of paranormal enthusiasts to see if they can catch any of the ghostly footsteps or even the whispers. But let me know, guys, have you stayed in a haunted pub? Have you got any haunted pub ghost stories? Let me know in the comments down below. Up next, I'm going to be talking about the ghosts of Lamb House in Rye, East Sussex. Lamb House is a Grade 2 listed building located in Rye, East Sussex. It is currently owned by the National Trust, but this building was built in 1722 by James Lamb, a wealthy wine merchant and politician. He also went on to become a mayor and a judge. Many people believe that Alan Grubble actually haunts Lamb House. Now, Alan Grubble was in fact the brother-in-law of James Lamb. Now, Alan was walking to James's house one evening when unfortunately he was stabbed to death. He was murdered by a local butcher and a pub landlord who went by the name of John Breads in a churchyard in 1743. Now, the twist to this story is that the intended target may have actually been James Lamb, who had recently fined this butcher for fraudulently selling short measures of the meat. John Breads was convicted and he was sentenced to hang. The gibbet and John Breads' skull are kept at the local town hall to this very day. Writer Henry James moved in to Lamb House in 1897. He decided to lease it for 21 years, but only after 2 years decided to buy the house outright. While living at the house, he felt inspired and wrote many books there, including Wings of the Dove and The Ambassadors. Henry James claims that while he's writing these books, he was often frequently disturbed by poltergeist activity. He would claim that while he was sitting there writing, flower pots would just randomly move on their own, or even stuff that was sitting on Henry's desk would randomly just be moved or thrown from the desk. But things would get more disturbing in the night when he'd be woken by tapping noises or cupboards and doors just slamming all by themselves. Now, many believe this is the restless spirit of Alan Grubble, the gentleman that was murdered by John Breads. Henry would also claim that when he struggled with writer's block, he would see a lady appear in front of him. Now, Henry wasn't frightened by this lady. In fact, he felt reassured by her presence. Now, after Henry passes away, this property is then sold to, in fact, another writer called Edward Frederick Benson. Soon after Edward settles into the property, he soon begins to witness frightening poltergeist activity. Now, one afternoon, Edward had invited a local vicar round, and they both spent that afternoon sitting in the garden. They both said they'd witnessed an apparition appear right in front of them. They said the figure was standing in front of the doorway and then it just walks off and vanishes. They both claim he was dressed in black and wore a cape. They also say they did not see his face as his head was turned away. Now the vicar claims he was so petrified that he jumped out of his seat and said, "Who was that?" But the story doesn't stop there, because in 1967 another writer in fact moved into Lamb House. Now Rue McGodden had moved into Lamb House only as a tenant, and she lived there until the death of her husband in 1973. She was so scared by what she had witnessed that she in fact invited a local priest into Lamb House to bless the house. After the priest had come in and blessed the house, the poltergeist activity seemed to have just stopped. So guys, that's all the stories I have for you today about the UK's most haunted locations. I hope you've enjoyed them as much as I have sharing them. Don't forget guys to let me know your favourite story down in the comment section below. And remember guys, the next time you visit a haunted location in the UK, you may just encounter a ghostly story of your own. Until the next time guys, sleep well.